Hello and welcome to another episode of Breaking the Guard. On today's episode, I'm going to talk again about one of these old war stories, which is the Ultimate Submission Showdown. This was a tournament back in 2003 in Torrance, California, where Ryan Gracie, creator of one of the creators of the UFC, had created the Ultimate Submission Showdown as a grappling showcase, which from my understanding, was supposed to be a showcase for Gracie Jiu-Jitsu because he had both his sons, Hiron and Henner, competing in opposite sides of the bracket. And they also had a mix of grapplers, myself being one of them, Jeff Monson, Travis Luter, and a few other different styles. And I think they were kind of going for a little bit of the UFC one dynamic where you had like a sambo guy, there was a judo guy, there was a shoe fighting guy. It was like the submission wrestler. You had Jeff Monson as the wrestler, and then you had two, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu guys. And I think he was kind of hedging his bets, figuring that his sons would be able to win the tournament and, promote Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. But chances are, that didn't work out the way they thought it would. And it did make for an interesting event. And just going into the background of it a little bit, at the time, I was doing really well in the grappling circuit. I was dominant. I think I was winning just about every naga I got into. No, scratch that. I did win every naga that I got into, all the absolutes and whatnot. Uh, I won those. There's only one in Georgia that I didn't win, which I contend that I got jobbed. But other than that, I won them all. Grappler's Quest. At that point, I had won every Grappler's Quest I entered. And my brother and I were being featured a lot in Grappling Magazine. So, my stock was pretty high at that point. I know they were talking about me being one of the best grapplers in the country. It was me, Dave Terrell, and I believe Travis Luter were like the three of that 185 pound, 200 pound division as the top American grapplers. So this tournament was a good one for me because, Travis Luter was in there. So I'm like, okay, this is a guy that I wanted to be able to measure myself against. Was a two-time ADCC trials winner. He didn't get too far at ADCC, but I mean, I understand he was always given a really bad draw. Like he got Compredo one time. I think he got Salo the next. Like he always had the eventual tournament winner. So hard way to start the ADCC, But he was a really good grappler. And of course, Jeff Monson was in there, and Jeff Monson is the ADCC champion. I think he had already won ADCC at that point. I'm pretty sure. So he was a high credential guy. The Gracies, I didn't know much about them other than they were Gracies. And I figured they're going to be good in traditional positions like closed guard or whatnot. And the other competitors I didn't really know anything about. I know one of the guys that competed against Peter Angerer was a German guy who was kind of an MMA shoe fighter. I know there was a judo guy. There was I think a Shudo or catch wrestler or something like that. I can't remember all the different. I mean, there's only 8 people, but my memory is kind of whack. But in any case, I was very excited to be part of this. It's an 8-man tournament. I think it was like a $2,000 prize, or maybe it was a $5,000. I think it might have been a $5,000 prize. I know it was a good prize at the time. That was, if it was 2,000, 1,000, 3, that was good prize money back then. And they did go out of the way to really treat all the grapplers well. I know Rose Gracie was the coordinator, and she was talking to me a lot. She was coordinating all the stuff. They took care of our travel. They took us there to Torrance a few days before and got us situated, and they were taking people around on a bus, and they were doing some B-roll type stuff. So pretty cool. It felt like a real production versus just your standard tournament where you just show up the day of the weigh-in and then next day you compete. There was actually some forethought done into this. and they were really cool about taking care of the fighters. So I was able to bring my brother as my coach, and then he had his wife along as well. So at that moment, that was probably the best treatment in grappling that I have gotten. Uh, Probably still to this day, honestly, like they did a really good job in that aspect. So it was pretty cool. Um, and what was interesting about this was you had Elio Gracie in attendance. So, I mean, if you're a jiu-jitsu fan, that's pretty cool. The old man was still kicking back then. And they did a press conference at the weigh-ins, and that's also where they drew the brackets, which was, I believe, was a randomized thing. They just had names in the bucket, and I think Elio Horion was pulling them out. And that's where they got the matchups. And I ended up drawing Henner Gracie as the first match of the tournament. And then Peter Anger got Kiego Kunihari, who was the judo guy, I believe. Travis Luter, man, I forget the guy's name. Patrick or Pat. Sorry, man. I just can't. He was a really nice guy. Oh, no, Lance Campbell? Lance Campbell, I'm pretty sure. So he went with Travis Luter, and then there was Hiram Gracie with Jeff Monson. So, uh, interestingly enough, these were like, if they were randomized, which I believe they were bad draws, in my opinion, for the Gracie brothers. Because me and Jeff were, besides Travis, were the most experienced grapplers, and this was a no-gi grappling tournament. The rule set was a bit different too. No points for takedowns, no time limits. First to submission or 12 points wins the match. As far as scoring, there was 1 point for reversals, which is any type of sweep or change from top position to bottom position. 3-point guard pass, 4-point mount, 4-point back mount. So pretty simple rule set, right? There's not much to confuse. Now, the one caveat they had in there was if someone was playing guard for 3 minutes and the top person was unable to pass, they would stop the match, reward the guard player with 1 point, and then reverse the position to allow the bottom person to be in their guard, in close guard. Kind of a weird rule they put in, but I guess it was to try to prevent stalling or whatnot. And to be fair, it kind of worked. Obviously, the no takedown rule, I think, was to benefit the Gracies, right? And perhaps because they didn't want it to become a wrestling match either. With a first to 12 point format, you could see how it could prevent the groundwork. So, at the time, I thought, oh man, this is kind of rigged. But I can see the logic in it, being so far detached. Like, it did make sense, like you want to see grappling. You don't want to see, garbage wrestling or whatnot. And so I could see the reason behind it. But there was a few circumstances, particularly Jeff Monson was really affected by this rule, where I think he kind of got cheated, right? But I'll get into that. So I was the opening match. When I actually met Henner Gracie, I didn't realize how tall this guy was. I'm 5'9". At the time, I think I was 200 pounds or somewhere around there. He was like 6'3", 6'4", and I think he was like in the 190s. So maybe a little lighter than me, but really, really tall. To me, it's like a basketball player tall. I'm like, oh crap, okay, this is going to be an interesting challenge because when you're fighting someone that tall, wrestling can be a little awkward, and then obviously the guard game can be a little trickier. And I imagine Gracie's, I'm thinking triangles from everywhere, right? So I had that going in my head. I was also thinking about strategy, and I had decided with my brother, I'm gonna pull guard on everybody because I want to be able to automatically score the first point, right? Because I figured like some of these matches are going to be very technical. Like I figured going against Gracie, the guard's probably going to be pretty strong. So I don't want to give up a point to him and be behind on the race. So I'm going to start off my guard first, and that way I can defend my guard and get the first point, then start on top, and then at least I'm ahead in the chase. I also figured no one had ever seen me pull guard in competition. I think I've only pulled it twice in my competition history. So most people expected me to wrestle and be on top. So I thought it would be a good like strategy as well, just to throw people off. And I was working a lot on my butterfly guard at the time, using double underhooks and whatnot. So I felt pretty confident I could defend it. So we get into the tournament. It's in a theater hall, and it's, very nice. They actually had that idea. Like, I didn't remember this detail, but it was kind of a pit. Big mat space. Not as obviously, if you guys seen CGI and Karate Combat, the pit is very beveled. Theirs wasn't like that, but it was a little bit sloped at the edges, right? Just a little bit. And I know this because they recently released a video on Tubi, and I'm gonna do a breakdown of my match with Henner because that one was an interesting match actually, a lot of action on both ends. So I think that should be coming out next week on Saturday if I set it up right. So you'll get to see that, and I'll put the link to the event on the description below this video just in case, so you can get access to this as well. But they had a really good camera crew. They had a crane over the top, so the camera could move around, and they had cameramen all over. Like I said, production was very well done. What was also interesting when they announced us like they would in a real MMA fight. This wasn't like a Naga or a Grappler's Quest or or anything like that where there was like other things, and this was just like we were the main event. That was the only thing going on. The only matches were these 8 matches that they were showcasing. So they announced me, they announced Henner, and when I was on the stage in the ring, I realized that you have Ed O'Neill, and for you old timers, Al Bundy, right, from Married with Children. He's right ringside with the gentleman, Michael Clark Duncan, who played the Green Mile, was right next to him, and then right next to them both, Elio Gracie. So I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. We had these guys, but they all, of course, trained with Henner, so they were rooting for him. But nevertheless, cool to have those guys in the audience. Match starts, and I pulled guard immediately, and my strategy was working. I was actually able to sweep because I went for a leg lock, and then in the scramble, I was able to wrestle on top, and I got the first point. I guess I'm going to spoil a little bit, of course, but the breakdown will explain everything in detail. But I did get in trouble quite a few times. He got me actually once in a really tight kimura and from a figure 4 guard, which is kind of crazy, right? Normally, most people, when they put you in a figure 4 guard, they're just kind of stalling. He was able to reach over my back from being flat and lock up a kimura. And I had to roll out to essentially give up the mount so that he can give up the kimura. And then I was able to escape, reverse him, then pass his guard. And once I got on top and I actually went to pass his guard, I realized my knee cut game was like kryptonite to him. Like they weren't really well versed in how to defend knee cuts. So I was able to knee cut him multiple times back to back. So about like the 8-minute mark in, I was up, I think, 9-5. So I just needed one more guard pass to win. And I was able to score, I was able to hit a guard pass, boom, stick it. And mind you, I'm like in kesekatame, head down, hips on the mat, controlling the underhook, have the other arm, the tricep, and I'm like chest to chest with him, walking my hips up as he's trying to, go ballistic to recover his guard. And I'm not kidding you, I believe on the clock, 17 seconds passed. And the referee, which was, I believe, Franginia, he's just looking like doing something, like some type of calculation It was 3 second control time to score a position. I was there for 17 seconds before Henner finally recovered his guard, and then the referee's like, oh, no score. My brother, it's funny in the video, you can see him throwing a fit, right? And I ended up having to continue to grapple another 10 to 11 minutes before I was able to achieve victory. Because after that point, he seemed to get wise to the knee cut and started playing knee shield. And then it became harder to pass. Actually got stuck in one reverse side triangle that was pretty tight. That was probably the tightest submission that I had to really like dig deep to pull out of. But after getting out of that position, I was able to score a pass and win the match. I think at that point it would have been 13-7 that I ended up winning. But that match took 21 minutes. So, and like I said, there was a lot of action because I had to gut out of a couple of the Kimura and the side triangle, which was pretty tight. He tried a collar choke at one point, but I didn't really feel that one. Because he was actually wearing a gi. I forgot to mention this. Big deal, right? I guess they were trying to go with the whole Royce Gracie image that, they're going to go with a gi in a no-gi tournament. But I was allowed to grab his gi, and I made judicious use of it because I was passing his guard also by just grabbing both of the sleeves and knee cutting off the sleeves. So, like, I don't think it really worked in his advantage to have that gi. Or interesting choice. I think they overestimated their ability to use it against, their own gi against the opponent, right? But I won that match. I remember after that match, they did a little interview after the match, just off the side, like they do in the UFC or whatnot. And then I went to the back room. My heart was pounding because particularly that last triangle was really tight, took a lot out of me, and my heart was like, probably going like 120 easy. Actually, 120 is not that fast, maybe a little higher than that. But I know I was just laying down and my heart was just thumping out of my chest, right? And probably for a good 30, 45 minutes. Fortunately, I had a good enough break where I got to mostly recover from that because the next match, I think it was Peter Anger versus Kiego Kunihari, and Peter was much small. He was the smallest guy in the tournament. I believe he was like maybe 160 pounds or something like that. 170, I think. Yeah, not super light, but he was definitely the smallest guy. So, and Kiego was actually a big heavyweight. And he was able to heel hook him very quickly, win that match. Then you had Lance Palmer, not Lance Palmer, I think. Lance, damn, I said his name earlier and it just keeps slipping me. I'm thinking of Lance Palmer, from PFL. He trains here also, so I'm mixing up names. Lance Campbell, there you go. Fought Travis Lutter. Travis Lutter was able to catch him, I think, with a triangle, or maybe it was Americana. But he took care of him pretty early as well. Then the last match of the tournament, because it was an 8-man, it was Hiram Gracie and Jeff Monson. And that match, fortunately for me, took a long time. It was I think it was over an hour. And I had foreseen this situation, particularly going against a guy like Jeff Monson, where he's not particularly a great guard passer, but he's great on getting on top. So he was probably going to score top position and then not be able to pass. The person on bottom is going to get the point for the 3 minutes, and then they're going to switch positions, right? So then Jeff also has a good guard. At least, in his wrestling way, he doesn't get passed. So I figured this match is just going to go back and forth, 1-1, 1-1, and whoever got the initiative is going to win this match. And that's why I was always pulling guard first, because I'm like, if I'm going to get sucked into one of these battles, I'm going to be ahead on the scorecard. Jeff was wise to this too, because he's a good tactician, and he pulled guard first. So he had the first point. So you would have thought that he would have won on the 1-1-1-1-1 uh, scoring, but they kind of gypped him. And at one point, he's off his back playing butterfly guard, and Hiron's on top, and he comes up to his knees and runs him over, right? Like kind of blast doubling him down, but from his knees. They called that a takedown, didn't give him a score, which basically flipped who was scoring the first point. Because from that point on, now Hiron was going to be ahead. Because now basically the order of who was up first switched. So Jeff ended up losing 11-12 when he should have won, in my opinion, 12-11. Not a great match for people to watch, right? you know, uh, but even though Hiron won that match, he lost the war because he just did over 60 minutes with Jeff Monson, who's a huge monster. That's a lot of wear and tear. And his next match was Travis Lutter, who was pretty much fresh. On my end of the bracket, I had Peter Angerer, and I was able to make quick work of him. I pulled guard, and he tried to actually cartwheel past me, which is one of my moves. But I know how to defend my moves. So when he tried to cartwheel through me, I jumped into a knee bar, and then he had to give up top position, and I ended up landing in top side control, got to mount. He was pretty good at defending himself from the mount. He was kind of just crossing his arms a little bit. So I switched to side control, locked up a Kimura, and finished him with a Kimura. And this was even before I was Kimura chopping people. This was just classic Kimura from side control. So that was a quick one for me, and I needed that, right, because I needed time to recover. On the other end, Travis had Hiron, and Travis is also a gi player, so he knows how to fully utilize the gi to his advantage. So that was probably like a nightmare matchup for Hiron. And Travis pretty much destroyed him. I think it was like 12-0 or whatnot. And he just kept getting his back. He was able to get behind him because Travis was very good at putting top pressure for passing, and then they would try to avoid the pass, end up exposing the back, and then he would capture the back. So he ends up winning a pretty dominant match. I think his took a little longer, but it was very one-sided. So then that set up the finals for me and Travis. And at this point, I was feeling pretty good because I've had a good amount of break. I'm mostly recovered. So I feel fresh, ready to fight this guy. And we start the match. I used the same strategy, which was I pulled guard, and I was able to defend my butterfly guard for 3 minutes, got the first point, got the reverse. And I'm like, oh, we're doing good. And then when I went to pass, I think I went for a leg lock. I'm not sure what happened, but he ended up scrambling up to his feet or getting on top, and then I pulled guard again. So I'm like, okay, I'm up 1-0. I'm on my back. If he stays on top for another 3 minutes, I'm going to be up 2-0. I'm going to be, doing good in the scorecards. But on the second time on top, my guard started to wear. And he recognized that he had my number at some point because he put a lot of pressure on the pass. And at one point, he was able to make a move and was able to jump straight to the mount. And that was unfortunate for me because I pretty much went from the mount. I bridged over. He got back mount. I returned to, bottom side control. He stepped into my half guard for 3 seconds and then boom, was able to burn me again with another pass, scored another 3. And then I went from 1-0 to 11-1, like in a matter of like 30 seconds or so. Like it might have been like more, probably like a minute. But he racked up a bunch of points really quickly. And it was game point at that because first to 12 wins and he's already up to 11. So I was like, oh crap, I goofed. At that point, I realized strategy change. I'm not playing off my back anymore, right? Like this guy, I my guard's not working right now. I think I was a bit more tired than I let on. And I know for me, especially mainly back then, when I was tired, my bottom game would suffer. If I was tired on top, no problems. But tired on bottom, not great. So I recognize I gotta work to my feet. So I would stand up, and then I think the first time around he pulled guard, and he didn't engage with me in the wrestling. And then when I started working top pressure, I got a couple close looks to passing, and then I think he realized, oh, this is not good for me either. So then he stood up. So then we ended up having a wrestling match, but we both weren't really committing because I'm thinking there's no scoring, and I don't want to risk getting overexposed on a takedown. So none of us were really committing to any serious takedowns, but they were pretty quick to address that. Like after like 20 seconds of kind of just dancing with each other, they flipped a coin and put one of us at bottom, one of us at top. And at that point, whoever ended up on bottom just wrestled up, and then it restarted the game. And each of us got a little bit of time to work on top, but ultimately it kept resulting in somebody wrestling up. So after a few of these rounds, and there was quite a few, Travis, one of them, stayed on his back rather than try to wrestle up. But he played his guard longer, giving me more time to try to work to pass it. But he was playing a lot tighter, so it wasn't an open guard, the butterfly guard. It was a lot of closed guards. So I was just getting frustrated, trying to open guard and get around it. And I didn't realize what he was doing. He was smart. He realized he can wait the 3 minutes, hold the guard. And since he wasn't playing closed guard the entire match, his closed guard was fresher, I believe. So he had saved his best guard work for that last round, so to speak. And around the 30-second mark, he really locked it in. And then I realized, oh shit, like he's going to win this match on the 1 point, right? Because if I don't pass his guard in 3 minutes, it's over. So I started panicking there, to be honest. Like, I'm like, crap, because I couldn't open the guard. I was trying to stand, the guard was staying closed, and I was worried about getting back swept. I did something very silly. It looks so stupid when you see it on camera. But I'm like, at one point his guard was still closed, but it kind of loosened up a little bit. His knees weren't pinching. And I'm like, F it, I'm gonna go straight down the middle. I tried to slide my way through his closed guard. And mind you, I got somewhat the way in. My knees were over his stomach. Well, no, that's not exactly true. My hips got through. My knees were just like inside his hips. So I ended up getting stuck there because he just locked a figure four, almost like a lockdown, if you will, if my memory serves me right, where I was basically now on my hands with my hips over his belly, but my knees stuck between his legs. And now the time was very short. Like it was maybe like 15, 20 seconds left and the match was over. So I started doing the worm, just like trying to wave my way through to wiggle my legs out. But I was also knew the very likelihood that I was exposing my back here because since I had to post on my hands, I couldn't block any go unders, right? But I had put myself in this terrible predicament and there was nothing more I could do. I could figure out that moment except try to wiggle my way through this thing. And at a certain point, he took the opportunity to duck under one of my arms and start climbing for the back. I went to a tripod, but he was just too fast and was able to throw the hooks standing. So I was tripoded, but he had both hooks in, and that's all she wrote. He ended up winning the match, and there was a back bounce, so it ended up being 15-1, right? But solid victory by him. I obviously made some strategic blunders there, but it was a fun match. I played the best I could with the hand that I had, and they brought out Elio at the end, and he did the whole ceremony. Travis won the first place prize. I won the second place prize, which I think was like $500 or something, which better than a stick in the eye, right? But it was a fun experience, and it was cool. I got to watch the whole. Like I said, the link is below. If you haven't watched it yet, just go ahead. You can look at the whole event in its entirety on Tubi.tv, which is a free service. So I think you have to register or whatnot, but like you get to watch it for free anyways. So no big deal. And then I'll release a breakdown of my match with Henner sometime next week. But yeah, that was a fun experience, and I got to measure myself with somebody who was at the top of his game, at that time, and probably, one of the top grapplers in the country. Like I said, I got to grapple Dave Terrell. Uh, I think it was after that event, or maybe it was before. I also lost to Dave Terrell on points. I think it was 2-0 or something like that. Or it might have been 4-0. I ended up giving up a takedown at the end to try to get him in a Kimura. That was a Kimura chop attempt. That didn't work out. But yeah, so I got to face both those guys, both very, very tough dudes. And yeah, there was a lot of solid grapplers back then. I know, like, I think, like I told you guys, I had Oliver here and I was showing him some of these matches, and he was like, "Oh man, like this is a lot of like I see a lot of elements of the modern game." Like, yeah, like they were doing it back then. Obviously, the guys now have refined it a lot more, right? But like, there were the same fundamental principles were always in play, but we've just gotten a lot more technical. And I feel like the smaller details we're able to leverage a lot more now. Like obviously the leg lock game, like if you watch my match, I was doing all ashigarami attacks, and it was just straight ankle lock, heel hook, knee bar. Those were like the attacks I was going for, and they were very elementary, right? And not the cleanest either. In particular, my match with Henner was a little trickier because he was so tall. It felt awkward because I could never really get far enough down his leg, right? And like I couldn't create enough separation, I felt, because like he was too tall for me to get to the end of that lever, like because I want to get all the way back so that his toes are touching my tricep, and I'm right under his Achilles. I kept being like calf deep. I'm like, this is not working. And he also tried to go for a lot of foot locks, but none of them were close either. I felt like it was like the opposite problem. Like I was too short, and like we didn't find our range at all for leg locks. So it was like a non-factor in the match. But yeah, so those are good times, and I'm happy that I finally got to see this. So you don't understand. Like my brother at one point had put like a $10,000 bounty back in 2003 and 4, like for someone to give us video to watch this match, and it was always like rumors, like, oh yeah, it's in Gracie, Miami, or oh, like we have it here. Like people say I've seen the match in video, but like no one would ever like share it or even sell it. Again, my brother wanted to buy it. I'm guessing that it was kept hush hush, and but I guess for whatever reason they finally decided to release it on Tubi. It's a weird platform to release it on, but I'm glad I got to see it, and my memory served me mostly correct. Because I remember in Grappling Magazine, they reported the times like pretty off. Like they were saying my match with Henner was like 13 minutes. I'm like, man, that match was a lot longer. And then when I looked and I watched it on the actual match, I'm like, yeah, it was 21 minutes. I'm like, that makes sense because I remember it was a long freaking match and I was exhausted, and then I had good cardio. So like for me to be really tired, it had to be a long match, And then my match with Luder was also a longer one. It was like 15 minutes or something like that. So like these were battles, and these were continuous rounds. So it's not like ADCC where there's a break and then you get to start over. Like this is just one long round. So the no time limit concept there worked when you combined it with a point limit, right? So these matches weren't boring. Well, the exception of maybe the Monson Hiron match. But the other matches, like my match with Henner, I mean, I'm biased, but it was exciting. And not just because of me, like he was doing a lot of good work on there. And in the breakdown, I'm not biased towards myself. I covered a lot of his good catches and sweeps, so like it was a good back and forth match. Uh, and the other matches there were a lot of submissions, so like it was a solid rule set. It's a shame that it didn't really take off because it did work, right? It did make for a lot of groundwork. Now I feel there could have been some tweaks because they totally killed the wrestling by having no scoring in the wrestling. I understand they don't want people to game the wrestling, but I think you could be a little more creative to make that work. But I think it accomplished its job. It was an entertaining event. I'm. It just sucks that I think that Hiron, or not Hiron, I'm sorry, Horion didn't release it because I think he felt like, oh, it wasn't the outcome he wanted. I imagine he was expecting both his sons to meet in the finals and then one of them win and then victory for Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, the best grappling sport, martial art in the world, right? And obviously kind of fumbled the bag there because his son lost the first round. The other son should have lost the first round, but ended up getting beat badly in the second round. And you ended up having two Americans that are like, well, Luter's comes from a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background, but I was, Ronin, so I don't think it was the outcome that they were hoping for. And I think as a result, he's like, oh, we're not gonna release this or market it because this is kind of wasted. Like I'm not gonna release this event to push something that brings Gracie Jiu-Jitsu down, which is unfortunate because it was a good event, and especially at the time, the production value was really high. So kind of wild that he just like sat on that to take a loss, because I imagine it must have costed a pretty penny back then with all the production that they put into it. But at least we got to see it now. Better late than never. And like I said, links are going to be below in this description so you guys can check it out and you can let me know your thoughts. And thanks for listening to the story here. And I will see you all next week.